Wally, come on over, Wally.
Wally Moore. This will be kind of a hard act to follow, these two gentlemen that was sunk.
Hang on a second. Mike's gonna get you mic'd up here.
Okay.
There. I'm gonna run this under your collar.
Wally, why don't you just give us your name and your age and stuff so you can get a mic check in. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Delton, Delton, Walling, Wallling. Everyone knows me by the name of Wally.
And your
I was born May the 6th, 1921. I am 94 years of age.
happy birthday.
Well, for my birthday last week, I sky jumped. I sky jump every year on my birthday. Last year I couldn't jump because had the gout, so I couldn't jump last year. The only year I had missed.
Wow. Well, Wally, now, you were on the Pennsylvania, right?
The Pennsylvania was a flagship of the Pacific Fleet. I went aboard the Pennsylvania at Bremerton, Washington in 1940. That was the flagship of the Pacific Fleet under Admiral Richardson, a very wonderful, brilliant admiral. And shortly after I went aboard, Roosevelt came to him and said, I want the fleet at Pearl Harbor. Richardson refused because in 1936 he had pulled a mock attack on Pearl Harbor and he knew it could be done. And he also knew that we were outgunned in every category of ships at the beginning of the war. We had, at that time, 3 carriers. They had 10. They had 102 destroyers. We had 62. We were outgunned, and we shouldn't be in the waters with the Japanese. There was no chance on the beginning of the war to win a battle if you come head to head. And he knew that. And so he was threw out, disgraced. You never heard of Admiral Richardson again. Admiral Kimmel was 53rd in line in the admirals, and Nimitz was just ahead of him. So they Nimitz gave the position to Admiral Kimmel. He said, let him have it. Do you realize now that the greatest admiral of the Pacific, Admiral Nimitz, could have been the GOAT? Because Kimmel took the job. And he told Roosevelt at the time, I don't want to take it to Pearl Harbor, but I also don't want to lose my rank. So I will take the fleet to Pearl Harbor and do the best I can to get it ready. And so on the day of the raid, of course, he became the GOAT. Admiral Kimmel was a wonderful, wonderful admiral. I was in his communication force until he was relieved, and then I was in Nimitz's communication force I was his first-class signalman in his communication force until I got too high and had to go someplace else. He hated to take over the fleet under the conditions that Kimmel lost it, because he was in Washington with Kimmel at the time, so he knew what everything was going on in Washington. And when he took over the fleet, he let Washington know that he was the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet. He was in charge. Washington wasn't. If I make a mistake, you can throw me out, but don't anyone have anything to say from Washington. And he was a great admiral. I traveled with him. I was his personal signalman, so I traveled with him everywhere. So after, well, I suppose we better get back to Pearl Harbor. On the day of the raid at Pearl Harbor, I was out for I was a boxer at that time, and I was out for my 20-mile run, and I also had a man on the tower that owed me some money, and he's being transferred. And I know very well I'll never see him again after he goes, so I'd like to get a little money back. And so I stopped off at the tower at 6:30 in the morning. And as I came up there, the boys told me there's something going on at the entrance of Pearl Harbor. They didn't know what it was. We could see it from the tower, but we didn't know what was going on because no messages was ever sent to us. And then we found out then that the Ward had sunk a submarine at 6:30 there in the morning. That submarine was trying to sneak in on the cable between the Antares, which is a supply ship, and a tug that was being brought in from Palomar Island. And as they was changing it over, the tug got in there between. Now, there had been something going on about 3 o'clock in the morning. Some ship saw a submarine. They thought it was a submarine somewhere between Honolulu and the base. And when the word was sent there, they couldn't find it. And so that was kind of forgotten. But now the word is circling around there, and somebody sees a con or something in between the the barge and the tug. And so the Ward went to general quarters, and they circled around, and when they came in on the other side, my God, there's the sub sitting about 150 yards away. And so this lieutenant that was on the Ward that day, that was his first day of assignment. And he was going to have to make one awful decision. Do I fire or don't I? But he fired immediately. Told him fire. Number 1 gun overshot. Number 3 hit it right at the con, right at the water line. And it started to sink. At the same time, there was a PBY overhead, and they didn't want to sink one of our subs or something, and they was holding back. But when the Ward went and put the depth charges to them, down it went, and they got in the act, and they also dropped depth charges on the sub. And it sank at that time. Of course, we didn't know how deep, but it turned out to be 1,142 feet down. That sub was never found for 62 years. Now, just as soon as the war sunk it, they sent a message to Admiral Kimmel, sighted sub in restricted area, and sunk same. Well, he got his staff together and we got to verify this. Well, you can't very well verify it if it's down 1,100 feet. At that time, they don't know. And so all they could do was send back the same message. So this took time. See, this is 6:30, and it took a half an hour on each one of them. And so now it's getting pretty close to 8 o'clock. There was another incident at that time. The radar had picked up the Japanese plates coming in, and the two boys was practicing. Radar was brand new, and we didn't understand it yet. And these boys coming back off in Liberty stopped to practice. And boy, when they turned it on, it was full of blops, blimps. They didn't know what it was. So they called their officer in charge and told him what it was. Well, at that time, we had some B-17s coming in and from the States, 15 B-17s. And so the officer in charge, he said, well, it's the B-17s coming in. Shut her down and go home. So these are those little things ahead of 756 when we got hit at Pearl Harbor. Now, our colors go up at 8 o'clock, and here it's 7:56. I'm sure that the colors at Pearl Harbor went up a few seconds early, because no one is going to stand there and wait. If they're being strapped and bombed, are going to stand there and wait another 4 minutes before 8 o'clock for the colors go up.